Reintroduce our guest today, Professor Patrick McNutt, visiting fellow at Manchester Business School, was kind enough to join us for the duration of the program today out of Singapore. Good professor, hello to you.
Good morning,
It's nice to see. It's nice to see you again. Lots going on in the world. We're still talking a lot about the flow over from the G20 meeting, and the currency markets are going a little haywire these days. What's really top of the agenda from your perch, sir?
I think certainly the exchange rates were not discussed at the G20, but there was a lot of discussion about macro coordination, and I think that eventually, maybe by Canada next year, there should be some consideration given to the exchange rates. But even today, with the strengthening of the yen, for example, you'll see that there will be concern about the corporate earnings from Sony and Toyota and Canon. And top of the agenda is the concern that currency misalignments are feeding into operating losses in many of the big international companies. And unless we can find a way, or unless the G20 can find a way to readdress the imbalance in many of the exchange rates, we're going to see a precipitation of this recovery into 2010, 2011.
Did somebody muck up the agenda in Pittsburgh at the G20? I mean, they issued these edicts, right, on executive compensation, on, regulation or regulatory oversight, and they didn't really talk currencies, and now every central banker is talking about currencies, and you've got the Japanese finance minister, for instance, jawboning, denying that he wanted the yen to strengthen to cheapen imports because that was supposed to save the economy. I mean, they had days, 2 or 3 days in Pittsburgh to talk about this. They really didn't, and now they're making up for lost time. A little strange, isn't it?
It is a bit strange, yes, because even if you go back to March this year, I mean, the Chinese were signaling that exchange rates should be on the agenda, most certainly the role of the US dollar as a reserve currency. And there were comments attributed to the Prime Minister of Australia just after the meeting that he hopes that maybe come next June in Canada that we may be looking at exchange rates on the agenda. France and Germany, they took a position that exchange rates are not normal on the agenda, but I do think that slowly but surely there will be a realization that exchange rates are important.
Right now, with so many people coming out and in tacit support of the dollar, this is not an offense. This is definitely a defensive kind of mechanism, isn't it? When you have people like Mr. Trichet over at the European Bank and Mr. Geithner coming out and talking about something that is absolutely, totally not happening in the markets. I mean, the markets are deciding one thing, and they're coming in and trying to teach us a thing or two way after the fact, a little bit too late.
Indeed, I agree with you, Bernie, because what we're observing is that the dollar is effectively depreciating. And what we predict is that this could continue right into first quarter 2010. Now, it may suit the Americans to allow the dollar to devalue. Effectively, it solves part of their trade deficit. But the worry is that a devalued dollar transfers American deflation across the rest of the world. And ultimately, there's one thing, which is that if we go back even 100 years ago, we had a concern about the role of sterling, and sterling was replaced by the dollar. I think today it's the same issue. The dollar is being seriously considered as an international currency because a lot of trade with many economies is not necessarily towards the US, and it's not necessarily dollar denominated. So we're looking at a possible end of the role of America as a leading international trading partner. And with that, of course, comes the whole position of the dollar itself.
Very interesting.